All right, welcome back, everybody. So, today, what I want to talk to you guys about is evolution by natural selection. Okay, so that's what we're talking about today, evolution by natural selection. Now, what is evolution? Okay, let's just start with that. We had a lot of readings, okay, in chapter 15. And so, what we're going to try to do is summarize what evolution is. Okay, remember that evolution is the change of a population over time. Now, what we want to figure out today is understanding what I mean by that and why it happens. Okay, so what is evolution? And it's the change of a population over time. And let's talk about what this looks like and why it happens. First, we have to recall our reading about Darwin, Charles Darwin. Okay, remember Charles Darwin was it's basically the pioneer of evolution. And he took a very important journey around the world, okay, conducted lots of research that led him to develop his theory that explains why evolution occurs. Remember, he went to the Galapagos Islands, okay, where he saw the various islands and the various species within those islands. And he used all that research to develop his theory of evolution. Okay, Darwin named his theory natural selection. Okay, and so what we want to do for the rest of the video is talk about what natural selection is and how natural selection changes a population over time. Or in other words, how does evolution occur because of natural selection? All right, guys, so let's talk about natural selection, okay? So what is this theory of natural selection? Why does evolution occur? Okay, and so let's talk about this. So the first thing you guys have to understand is that Darwin argued that in nature, there's a struggle for existence, okay? There's a struggle to survive. Now, why is that? Why is there a struggle for existence? We've talked about this, and actually Darwin got this idea from the work of Thomas Malthus, okay? Because he did his work on populations. And so what Darwin argued, okay, and what he understood was as populations grow, as they get bigger, okay, then that equals or that leads to not enough space, not enough food, not enough resources, right? And so because of this, exists this struggle for existence, right? Okay. And so what does this lead us to? So now the population, there's overproduction, there's not enough space, there's not enough food, there's not enough resources. And so what that leads to is competition within a population. That leads to competition within a population. Competition for what? For homes, for space, for food, for resources. Okay, and so that is at the gist of this. That's what it's very important, right? And so now that there's competition for space and food and resources because they're struggling to exist, to survive, okay, then who wins this competition? Who wins this struggle for existence? Okay, and so there's two ways you can look at it. Those individuals that survive and reproduce, okay, are the ones that survive, those individuals with the highest fitness. What does fitness mean? That means that there's variation in a population. And those individuals that survive and reproduce are the ones with the best adaptations. Those are the ones that survive and reproduce, the ones with the best adaptations. For what? Adaptations for what? To compete in that environment. So, for example, if we were talking about snakes and there was these birds roaming around trying to eat the snakes, right? Well, which snakes will survive? Which snakes will avoid the predators? Well, maybe those snakes that have the best camouflage that makes it harder for the birds to see them. Okay, the camouflage is an example of an adaptation. And because they have those best adaptations, then they're more likely to survive, okay, and reproduce. And so we say that those individuals have high fitness. Now, on the contrary, let's say we have individuals, okay, that have poor adaptations for that environment. Then those guys, we say, have a low fitness and they are least likely to survive and reproduce, or in other words, they die and do not reproduce. Why do they die and not reproduce? Because the adaptations that they have, okay, are not they do have adaptations, but they're not the best ones for that environment. Okay, so they're not suitable for the environment or for nature. So, for example, let's say there were snakes, and some of the snakes were, easy to spot from the sky, and so the birds or the eagles would come down and boom, grab the snakes because they're easier to see, and so those snakes would die, and if you die, you don't reproduce. Okay, and so it's very important that we understand this idea that there's adaptations within it, or there's variation in the population, and some of those individuals have better adaptations for their environments than others, so therefore they'll survive, reproduce, okay, they'll be able to win out, get those resources, get that food, whereas other individuals in that population die, do not reproduce, and we say that those individuals have low fitness. If there was no variation, then nobody would have an advantage, and therefore natural selection wouldn't occur. So that's very important. Variation is necessary. It needs to be present in order for natural selection to occur, in order for evolution to occur. Because if there's no variation, then there's nobody that has an advantage. When variation is present, then there's competition. Some of those individuals have better adaptations, therefore have higher fitness, and others can have less suitable adaptations and have less fitness. And therefore, over time, the population will change. Now, guys, what I want to make sure you understand is that the nature or the environment determine fitness. Okay, it's not the genes that determine fitness. It's not the genes. Okay, even though that the X's are blue because they have genes that make them blue, right? Okay, but that's not why they're fit. Okay, it's not because of their genes. It's because they happen to have a phenotype that gives them an advantage in this environment. Okay, let me give you a different example. Let's say the environment looked like this. Let's say now the environment, okay, those X's, those individuals now are in a different environment where they are now camouflaged. Okay, over time, now that phenotype, that green phenotype, okay, now that's giving them an advantage. And over time, the population would change so that you only have those green individuals. Okay, so their genes didn't change.
in these two examples, the environment changes. It's the environment that determines whether you are fit or not. Okay? So at the end of the day, we are born with the adaptations or the characteristics that we have, and we're hopeful that those adaptations give us an advantage to survive and reproduce. Okay? And in nature, if animals or individuals in a population don't have those particular adaptations to help them in their environment, then eventually the population will change to reflect those individuals that do have the advantage. Okay? And so this right here is an example of evolution, of a population changing over time because of natural selection. And this cannot happen unless variation is present. Because if there's no variation, then there's no competition because everybody is equal. Okay? So it's important. Okay? You need variation. You need then there's competition, and those individuals with the best advantages will give them that advantage to survive and reproduce, and eventually the population will change. Hope this helps. See you next time.